Stop being so dramatic, Sarah. You knew this was coming, my husband, David's words, cut through the air as he stood in our living room, smirking at the photo album I'd spent weeks creating. I mean, look at this. 25 years of marriage, condensed into a pathetic little book. Really? I watched silently as he flipped through the pages, carelessly bending the corners I'd so carefully arranged. Each photo represented a milestone in our life together. Our wedding day, the purchase of our first home, holidays, and family gatherings. What David didn't know was that between those memories lay something far more valuable than sentiment. Well, since we're being honest, he continued, closing the album with a dismissive snap. I've been seeing Emily from the office for the past 8 months. She's young, ambitious, everything you used to be. He gestured toward his packed suitcase by the door. I'm leaving tonight. I'll be staying at the Grand Vista Hotel until we find our own place. Emily, his 28-year-old intern. Of course, I'd suspected their affair since I noticed his late-night meetings and the mysterious perfume that clung to his shirts, but I'd kept quiet, biding my time, waiting for the right moment. That's quite the announcement, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. And on our anniversary, no less. Oh, come on, don't tell me you actually expected me to celebrate? He laughed, and the sound echoed through our high-ceilinged living room. The album, the dinner reservation I know you made at Lorenzo. It's desperate, Sarah. You're desperate. I rose from the couch, smoothing my dress, the emerald green one he'd always said made me look old. Walking over to where he stood, I reached for the photo album. You're right about one thing, David. This evening isn't going as planned. His eyebrows rose as I pulled the album from his grasp. What are you doing? Taking back what's mine, I replied, a small smile playing at my lips. After all, you won't be needing these memories anymore. What David didn't realize was that between those carefully curated photos lay the key to my future and the end of his comfortable life as he knew it. I'd known about David's affair for months, but that wasn't what had kept me up at night. 1 week ago, I'd received news that would change everything. My hands trembled slightly as I held the album, remembering the moment I checked those numbers on my lottery ticket. 6 numbers that had transformed me from an aging housewife into a multimillionaire. The memory of that moment was still crystal clear, sitting at my kitchen table at 3 a.m., double and triple checking the numbers under the dim light, afraid to breathe, afraid to believe. The first person I called wasn't David. It was Linda Parker, the most respected financial advisor in town. We'd spent 3 days meticulously planning and securing my future. Everything was already set up in my name only, protected by a team of lawyers who specialized in lottery winners. The trust was ironclad, the account secure, and my future carefully mapped out. I'd even started looking at beachfront properties in Malibu, dreaming of a fresh start away from the desert heat and suffocating memories. You know what's funny, David? I said, running my fingers along the album's spine. I always thought it would hurt more, discovering your affair, watching you leave. But somehow it doesn't. I thought about all the signs I'd ignored over the past 8 months, the late nights, the secret phone calls, the mysterious weekend conferences that never seemed to have any paperwork attached to them. He paused by the door, his hand on the suitcase handle. Don't tell me you're having some sort of emotional breakthrough? His tone was mocking, but I caught the hint of uncertainty in his eyes. For 25 years, he'd been able to read me like a book. Now, for the first time, he seemed unsure of what he saw. Actually, I've had quite a few breakthroughs lately. I sat down at our antique desk, the one he'd insisted we buy last year, putting us further into debt. It's amazing how clarity comes when you least expect it. I thought about the moment I decided to create this album, carefully selecting photos that would hide my secret between their pages. David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smirking. That's Emily. She's waiting downstairs. He straightened his tie, the blue silk one I'd given him for Christmas. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the house and assets. Try not to make this messy, Sarah. It's better for everyone if we handle this like adults. I nodded, watching him fidget with his watch. He was probably calculating how much he could get in the divorce, how he'd maintain his lifestyle with Emily. Little did he know that in exactly 3 minutes, his entire plan would crumble. The proof of my fortune was nestled safely between these pages, waiting to be revealed. Before you go, I said, opening the photo album once more. There's something you should see. I carefully extracted a document from between the pages of our Hawaiian vacation photos, the last trip we'd taken together, though David had spent most of it texting Emily while pretending to answer work emails. The paper was crisp, official looking. I held it delicately between my fingers, watching David's expression shift from impatience to curiosity. What's that? Another marriage counseling brochure? He let out a dry laugh. I think we're past that point, don't you? Actually, I replied, standing up straight, channeling the confidence that had been growing inside me since last week's discovery. It's something much more interesting. You see, while you were busy planning your new life with Emily, I was busy too. I unfolded the document slowly, deliberately. The California State Lottery Commission letterhead gleamed under our living room lights. David's eyes narrowed as he tried to read it from where he stood. What are you playing at, Sarah? His voice had lost its mocking edge. 7 days ago, I won the lottery, David. $98 million, to be exact. After taxes, it comes to a little over $60 million. I watched the color drain from his face. The funny thing is, according to California law, lottery winnings acquired before divorce proceedings begin are considered separate property. His suitcase hit the floor with a thud. You're lying, he whispered, but his eyes were fixed on the official seal, the verification codes, the amount spelled out in bold black letters. I'm not. I've already met with financial advisors, lawyers, and investment specialists. Everything's been processed and secured. The money's mine, David. All of it. He took a step toward me, then another, his face contorting with a mix of shock and desperation. Sarah, honey, let's talk about this. You know I still care about you. Maybe I've been a little hasty. A little hasty? I interrupted, my voice steady. Like when you booked that romantic weekend in Santa Barbara with Emily? Or when you used our joint account to buy her that diamond bracelet? His phone buzzed again insistently. Emily was still waiting downstairs, probably wondering what was taking so long. Irony wasn't lost on me, I continued. She was about to get a very different version of you than the one she'd been expecting. You can't do this to me, he said, his voice cracking. We're married. I have rights. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Actually, David, I can and I am. Emily's waiting for you. You shouldn't keep her waiting. After all, you two have an exciting new life to begin. David spent the next hour trying to salvage what he could from his carefully laid plans. His transformation was almost fascinating to watch, the way his previous disdain melted into desperate charm, how his smirk softened into what he probably thought was an endearing smile. I'd seen this performance before, but never with such high stakes. We can work this out, he said, pacing our living room. Think about it, Sarah. 25 years of marriage. That means something. We've built a life together. He gestured around our home, the one he'd mortgaged twice without telling me to cover his gambling debts. Sure, I made some mistakes with Emily, but that was just it. It wasn't real. You're my wife. I sat calmly, still holding the photo album. Your wife. Funny, you didn't seem to remember that an hour ago when you were calling me pathetic. His phone had buzzed at least a dozen times. Each time, he'd glance at it nervously before declining the call. Poor Emily was still waiting downstairs, probably wondering why her wonderful new life hadn't started yet. I'll break it off with her right now, David declared, reaching for his phone. I'll call her up here, and you can watch me end it. Would that help? Would that prove I'm serious? I shook my head, almost pitying him. You really don't get it, do you? This isn't about Emily. It's about 25 years of manipulation and disrespect. The lottery just gave me the freedom to finally see it clearly. That's when his tone changed. The desperate charm vanished, replaced by something darker. You think you can just walk away after everything I've done for you? He stepped closer, looming over me. I made you who you are. Before me, you were nothing. Just some small-town girl with big dreams and no direction. I remained seated, refusing to be intimidated. And now I'm a small-town girl with $60 million and a very good lawyer. I met his gaze steadily. Would you like his number? You'll be hearing from him tomorrow anyway. I'll fight you for every penny, he snarled. I'll drag this out for years. You think you can enjoy your millions while I'm dragging you through court? Actually, I reached into the album and pulled out another document. My lawyers have already prepared everything. They've documented your affair, your gambling, the money you've stolen from our accounts. They even have receipts for all the gifts you bought Emily with our joint credit card. How do you think that will look to a judge? The color drained from his face again. His phone buzzed one final time, and this time when he looked at it, I saw fear in his eyes. The message preview was visible, even from where I sat. What's going on up there? My father's waiting at the restaurant with the investor. We're going to lose everything if we don't show up now. I smiled, understanding dawning. Ah, let me guess. Emily's father was going to invest in your new business venture, the one you've been embezzling company funds to start. David stumbled backward, collapsing onto our Italian leather sofa, another extravagant purchase he'd insisted on. How did you? His voice trailed off as I pulled out yet another document from the album. It's amazing what people will tell you when they think you're just a harmless housewife, I said, smoothing the paper on the coffee table. Like Amanda from your accounting department. She's been concerned about those irregular transfers for months, but you kept dismissing her warnings. She was quite relieved to finally share her documentation with someone who would listen. You've been investigating me? His face contorted with rage. You had no right. Actually, your wife and a shareholder in the company, I had every right. The board of directors thought so too. When my lawyers presented the evidence last week, they're meeting tomorrow morning to discuss your position. Though, I suspect that discussion will be quite brief. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered it, hands shaking. Emily, I can't make it. Something's come up. He winced, holding the phone away from his ear as angry accusations poured out. Finally, he hung up, looking deflated. You've ruined everything, he whispered. No, David. You did that all by yourself. I just refused to play along anymore. I stood up, walking to our floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city lights. You know what the funny thing is? If you'd just been honest, if you'd asked for a divorce like a decent human being, I probably would have shared some of the lottery money with you. Not half, but enough. And now you get nothing. I turned back to face him. Well, not exactly nothing. You get to keep all the consequences of your choices. The board will be pressing charges for the embezzlement, by the way. They're particularly interested in those offshore accounts you thought nobody would find. David's face went from red to pale and back again. He lunged for the photo album, probably hoping to find more documents he could destroy, but I'd already removed everything important. What remained were just photos, memories of a life that no longer existed. Calculated. Manipulative. He cut himself off, apparently realizing the irony of his accusation. I learned from the best, I replied calmly. Though I have to thank Emily too. If she hadn't been so eager to brag about your plans together at her yoga class, I might not have discovered the embezzlement so quickly. Her friend Olivia was very chatty after a few glasses of wine. The truth was finally dawning on him. Every careful plan he'd made, every scheme he'd constructed, was crumbling. He wasn't just losing his comfortable life with me, or his future with Emily. He was losing everything. The police will be here soon, I added, checking my watch. Amanda filed the official report this afternoon. I'd suggest using this time to call a lawyer, a criminal defense one. You're going to need it. A sharp knock at the door made David jump. His eyes darted around the room, like a trapped animal, searching for an escape route. Our penthouse was on the 15th floor, there wasn't one. That'll be Detective Harrison, I said, walking calmly to answer it. He's been very interested in those offshore accounts. David grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. We can work something out. I'll sign whatever you want. Divorce papers, a confession about the affair, anything. Just don't do this. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. Remove your hand, David. Now. The knock came again, more insistent this time. David released me, stepping back. You don't understand. There are other people, powerful people. If this gets out. Oh, I know all about your powerful people, I replied, straightening my sleeve. Like Michael Anderson, who's been helping you hide money through his shell companies. He rolled over on you 3 days ago. Turns out, he's more afraid of federal prosecution than he is of you. David's face went ashen. That's impossible. Michael would never. He did, right after the FBI showed him proof that you were planning to pin everything on him. I smiled slightly. Your text messages were very enlightening. You really should have been more careful with your phone. Password 1234 isn't exactly Fort Knox. The knocking had become pounding. Mr. David Wilson, police. Open the door. David made one last desperate attempt. Think about what this will do to your reputation. Everyone will know you sent your husband to prison. Is that what you want? To be known as the vindictive wife who exposed a criminal? I interrupted, who helped uncover millions in corporate fraud? Who protected innocent investors from a scam artist? Yes, I'm comfortable with that reputation. I opened the door to reveal Detective Harrison and 2 uniformed officers. He's all yours, Detective. I believe you'll find his phone particularly interesting. He was just about to delete some incriminating messages. David's face contorted with rage as the officers approached him. You planned this whole thing, the photo album, the anniversary dinner. It was all a setup. Actually, the lottery win was pure luck, I said, watching as they handcuffed him. But everything else, yes, I planned it carefully. Consider it 25 years of investment finally paying off. As they led him toward the door, he turned back one last time. What about Emily? Are you going to ruin her life too? Emily made her own choices, I replied, but don't worry, she's already received copies of your texts with Michael Anderson, including the ones where you called her a useful idiot who would take the fall if anything went wrong. I imagine she's rather busy right now, probably talking to her own lawyer. I watched as they escorted him out, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The photo album still lay on the coffee table, filled with memories of a life that had been built on lies. But I didn't need those memories anymore. I had something better, a future of my own making. 1 year later, I sat in my new Malibu beach house, watching the sunset paint the Pacific orange and gold. The sound of waves had replaced the desert winds of our old home, and the salt air had washed away the last traces of my old life. The media circus following David's arrest had been intense but brief. Corporate fraud rarely holds public attention for long, especially when bigger scandals emerge. David had taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify against his co-conspirators in exchange for a reduced sentence, 8 years instead of 20. Emily had fled to Arizona after the scandal broke, her dreams of being a wealthy executive's wife shattered. I picked up the morning's paper. Another article about the case, this time praising the whistleblowers who'd exposed the fraud. My name was mentioned along with Amanda from accounting as key figures in uncovering the scheme. But that wasn't the story that interested me. Instead, I focused on the business section, where my new charitable foundation was featured. The lottery money had given me freedom, but it was the foundation that gave me purpose. We specialized in helping women escape financial abuse, providing resources and support for those trapped in situations similar to what I'd endured. Every success story felt like a personal victory. My phone buzzed, a text from Linda, my financial advisor. The foundation's latest investment had paid off handsomely. More money to help more women. I smiled, thinking about how far I'd come from that night with the photo album. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's life. It's about building your own. Better than ever. Last week, I received an unexpected letter from David. The prison envelope sat unopened on my desk for days before curiosity won out. Inside, I found pages of apologies, explanations, and pleas for forgiveness. He'd found God in prison, he wrote, and wanted to make amends. He also mentioned hearing about my foundation's success and suggested that perhaps we could work together once he was released. I had to laugh at his predictability. Even behind bars, he was still looking for angles, still trying to scheme his way into money. I shredded the letter without responding. That evening, at a charity gala for the foundation, I found myself sharing this story with James, a widowed investor who'd become a major donor to our cause. His genuine laugh matched mine, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he shook his head in disbelief. Some people never change, he said, offering me a glass of champagne. But others. He gestured around the room, where dozens of women who'd escaped similar situations were now thriving, many running their own businesses, others transformed completely. Speaking of transformation, I replied, remember that photo album? That started all this? I finally found a good use for it. I donated it to a museum's exhibition about financial fraud and domestic abuse. The album sat in a glass case, its pages open to show the hidden compartments where I'd stored the evidence. Below it, a plaque read, "Sometimes the strongest chains are the ones we think we can't break." James raised his glass. To breaking chains and building bridges, I added, thinking of all the women we'd helped and all those still to come.